as far as storytelling in general, comedy and horror, I think, have something in common in that they both rely on a kind of a cathartic response. They both utilize surprise, a bit of a shock. It's either the shock of the scream or the shock of the laugh. They do seem to have a relationship, comedy and horror, which I don't fully understand, but I know that I'm not the first person that works in both arenas. The guy who wrote The Exorcist, William Peter Blatty, had written only comedy before he did The Exorcist.
What's up, folks? What's going on? Welcome to the Spun Today podcast, the only podcast that is anchored in writing, but unlimited in scope. I'm your host, Tony Ortiz, and I appreciate you listening. This is episode 291 of the Spun Today podcast, and in this episode, I have a question for you. What happens when two seasoned storytellers come together to craft horror that doesn't just scare, but reveals the truth about who we are? In this episode, I sit down with Blu Topalli, aka Blu, and Peter Stass, the duo behind the upcoming horror podcast, The Night Visitor. Between them, they've worked across film, television, writing, and teaching. Blu has worn so many hats, from ghostwriting for TV, which, by the way, I regret not asking more about, because one of the shows she worked on was Dawson's Creek. And fun fact about me, I used to love that show. And I actually used to watch it with pen and paper and write down like all the cool big words they would say that I had no idea what they meant, and would look them up in the dictionary to try to use them and seem smart and sound like they did on the show. She also worked VFX for James Cameron on Titanic. Yes, that Titanic. And also had development roles on films like My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which we did get into in this episode. Her current work digs into gothic themes and psychological horror. Peter started with the intention of becoming a comic book illustrator and artist here in New York, and he discovered a love for film. He went on to co-write features like Relative Strangers, starring Danny DeVito and Kathy Bates, and he's also taught screenwriting at Gotham Writers Workshop. He's also directed award-winning shorts. He has a knack for exploring that fine line between humor and horror, some of which we touch on in this episode. And as I mentioned, together they've teamed up to create a new horror podcast called The Night Visitor. It's really immersive. I had the pleasure of getting a sneak preview of it. The first episode is going to air October 14th, 2025. And it's really immersive, it's atmospheric, and it leans into the tradition of classic radio dramas while pushing the boundaries of modern day sound design. In this episode, we dive into their creative process, what it really means to collaborate without ego, and how horror can be used not just to scare, but to reveal truths about humanity itself. You're in for a real treat, folks, so definitely stick around for all that good stuff. But first, I wanted to tell you all about a quick way that you can help support this show if you so choose. Your support means a ton. It helps to keep the lights on here in the proverbial Spun Today studios. It's motivating and validating for me, and very much so appreciated. If you'd like to support the show, you can go to spuntoday.com/support, where you'll find a ton of merch or affiliate links for things that you may already be in the market for, some discount codes, so on and so forth. And here is one of those ways that you can help support this show. Then we'll jump right into the episode. You can also support by checking out my writing. Go to spuntoday.com/free writing. Here, you'll find a collection of freely written thoughts, which is intended to be a cathartic, meditative practice for myself, but also winds up doubling up as motivation and inspiration for myself and others. You can also go to spuntoday.com/short stories to check out my latest short stories, and also listen to the free audiobook versions of those stories. You can also support my writing by going to spuntoday.com/books and check out what I have available for sale. Currently available is Make Way for You, which is a collection of tips for getting out of your own way. It's a great read for my fellow writers or creatives out there. Also available is Fractal, which is my debut time travel novel. And last but certainly not least, Melted Cold, which is a collection of short stories. Each of the books are available in all digital formats for your Kindle or iBook or any other e-reader, as well as paperback and hardcover options. Again, go to spuntoday.com/books, and I'd love to hear what you chose to check out, as well as your thoughts after reading. spuntoday.com/books. Spun Today listeners, today I am joined by two incredible storytellers, Blu Topalli and Peter Stass. Blu's known for gothic character explorations and dark humor and immersive horror, while Peter's written award-winning comedies and screenplays and taught screenwriting here in New York City. Together, they're working on a brand new horror podcast, The Night Visitor, and today we're diving into their creative process, their experiences, philosophies on writing and creativity, as well as what we can expect. Blu and Peter, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Thank you.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
Great to have you guys. And I had the pleasure of a sneak peek of episode 1 of The Night Visitor, which will be released on October 14th, if I'm not mistaken. And without giving anything away, I just wanted to say kudos to you both for how immersive it was. I thought the sound effects really pulled me in, as well as the story, and the voice acting was impeccable. So all of which we can get into a little bit later, but I just wanted to say great job to you guys on that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
No problem. And since it's your first time on the show, I wanted to start at the beginning. And Blu, we can begin with you. You're originally from Boston and now reside on the West Coast. Tell us a bit about growing up and how you eventually wound up making the trek out there to the West.
Yeah, I grew up in a little suburb outside of Boston called Newton. And, the movie theater was really big for us in the 70s and 80s when I was growing up. And I had two older brothers who were super into, sci-fi and comic books. And I was the youngest and the only girl and kind of grew up kind of a little bit of a tomboy, I think, just having two older brothers and that influence. And so we went to the movie theater weekly. That was like a huge escape for me. And then on Saturday mornings, we get up really early and watch The Creature Devil feature on Saturday mornings. And pretty much like all Saturday was dedicated to horror and sci-fi for us growing up. And basically when I got older, it wasn't really until I got out of high school that my oldest brother took me to the side and said, hey, listen, we come from an immigrant family and there's a lot of pressure to do a lot of different things, quote unquote responsible things. But he said, I really think you have an amazing eye and you should maybe take a film class or something, or photography or something. And I fell in love with film and I went to film school at Boston University and ended up coming out to LA just after college. I kind of tried to graduate early and just get out here as fast as I could and worked for places like Industrial Light and Magic and Sony Imageworks that got into visual effects and worked for a couple of big directors in that realm. And I worked in development. I became a development executive and worked on a lot of what we would say, I would say remakes, adaptations. And I met Peter at that time. I don't even remember, Peter, how long ago it was.
It's about 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been a while. And I would say like the films that really influenced me growing up were The Thing was very influential. I remember that being, one of my top films growing up. And I would say like probably really top Alien. Alien was really influential for me. Really these sort of the cosmic horror elements of it. And I think for me, sci-fi and fantasy has always been really big, and comic books has been an influence for me, probably more so for you, Peter, I'd say, but I guess I'm going to pass it on to Peter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that's kind of where I'm at.
Thanks for sharing, Blu. And not to cut things off or go off on a tangent, but real quick, just with the Alien movie tie-in. And Peter, feel free to incorporate this in your background as well. You mentioned the Alien movie, and I saw, Peter, that you are an illustrator as well. And
yeah, I'm an illustrator. I was originally going to be a comic book artist, and I went to the High School of Art and Design here in New York with the intention of doing that. And it was there that I discovered film. You could major in film. You have that option. You could major in illustration. But I was a lonely teenager, and the idea of myself sitting behind a drawing board for the rest of my life, I actually had a moment, like a real moment, like an epiphany, where you picture something in your head. And I pictured myself behind a desk, a drawing table, and I just went, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be sitting in a room by myself the rest of my life. And I thought, what's the most collaborative? And it was film. But I also did always have a love for film, I should mention as well. In fact, a lot of what Blarime was saying echoes with me. Watching creature features as a child growing up at the 7, we're the same age. At night, it was the color films, the British horror movies that were in color. And then during the day, it was the black and whites, the creature features, the Universal monster movies, Dracula, Frankenstein, all those guys. And as a kid also, I read these 2 magazines, and anyone my age will recognize these names, Starlog and Fangoria. Okay, so before the internet, Starlog took you into the background of the making of science fiction movies. And Fangoria was horror. And they would interview the people who were doing the special effects. They would do features on all the upcoming films. So there was always a love for movies. And, before I even really understood that I was being drawn to it. But I also loved visual storytelling as well. When I was a boy, also, again, in comic books in the 70s and 80s, John Byrne, the wonderful writer and illustrator of comic books, was the king during that time. And he was a huge influence on me, I think, as a writer, John Byrne. So that was a big thing. Also, I just wanted to say Blarime is she's being very, what's the word I'm looking for? Blarime has worked with some incredible people. She's been very humble. Blarime has worked for James Cameron on Titanic. Blarime's writing is what brought her out to LA to work for Lucasfilm. I mean, she's worked with some pretty big people, and she's worked in development. So she's a writer, but much, much more than that as well.
Oh, you're very kind, Peter.
Well,
thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah. As for my own background, I grew up in New York City in a housing project in Astoria in Queens. Like I said, I like to draw from the time I was very young. I love to go to the movies. There was a movie theater on Steinway Street. As a matter of fact, that movie theater that space is now a gym. And I was just on the treadmill the other day, and I was looking out, and you could still see the marquee. They still have it there. And I was thinking, I'm in the same space right now on a treadmill that I was in sitting and watching Ghostbusters and Fright Night and all the movies of that era. It's sort of a sacred space for me. I thought, how interesting if I could have projected myself years from now. One day you're going to be sweating in this space, as an adult that you're now sitting in and watching, but it's fine.
A nice full circle moment there.
Yes, totally. Yeah. So at High School Art and Design, where I decided to major in film, I decided that would be the focus because it's still visual and it's storytelling. And that was where I got into that. I'll try to compress it and jump forward. I did not go to film school, but I was largely sort of self-taught. And I would literally just watch a scene, pause it, and then write down what just happened. Watch the next scene, pause it, write down what just happened. I was trying to teach myself to understand the mechanisms of it. And so jump forward many years later, I wrote a screenplay of my own, and I happened to meet a guy who was successful through a mutual friend, a guy named Greg Gliena, who had just written Meet the Parents. And I met Greg during that time, and Greg liked my writing, and he took me on as a partner, and I moved to LA. And I met Blarime not long after I moved to LA. And I found that we were very compatible in terms of our aesthetic, in terms of the sort of things that we wanted to write about. And I was interested in horror, and Blarime was also interested in horror. And we began to develop some work together, some stories together.
Yeah, I feel like Peter is like, you're like my brother from another mother.
Yeah.
It's just, I feel it's almost like we're related. I mean, it really is, actually.
Yeah.
It's like one of those uncanny, I don't know if you believe in it, karmic connections, but
I believe in it. I totally
agree with
it.
it.
Absolutely.
Also because we met sort of randomly.
Very randomly, but just our thinking and our aesthetic and kind of the way our brains work is so in sync. It's like when we write something, I can't really tell who wrote what. Like at the end of it, I go, was that your line or mine? I don't even know. Like at the end.
The essence of collaboration. It's great. It's a great.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And there's no like, between us, I really feel like there's none of those ego trips or any of that I think really get in the way. And I, having come from, I too came into more, I would say more officially in a writing capacity as a ghostwriter. And that happened because I also worked with a writer who was working kind of this little bit of this paranormal space as well. He taught me a lot about structure, which I have really, really taken to heart and I'm really appreciative of. A guy named Ozzie Cheek, who I think
Great
he like
name.
fled the country. Anyway, yeah, Ozzie Cheek from the Appalachians. He like fled the country, I think, is what happens with him. But great guy, and taught me so much. And that was around the time that I met you. And yeah, I mean, I had been working in development and stuff, and I do feel like what I would see when I was working in development as a director of development on features, I'd see different writers come in and different, sometimes writing partnerships was much more rare. It's very difficult, the collaborative process, and finding that chemistry with somebody is like finding a needle in a haystack, and it's very difficult to maintain over a long period of time. So when you find it, you hold on to it.
Yeah, it is a great thing. I also want to mention Blarime worked with Dino De Laurentiis. Anybody who grew up in the 70s knows that name, Dino De Laurentiis and his company. I mean, so again, being honest. And
he sounded like everything that you think about is like Dino of like his famous quote, "When Delanky die, everybody cry." He would actually really like walk around the office.
You know this, Tony?
Really,
so this is a reference to Dino De Laurentiis made a famous remake of King Kong in 1976.
Okay.
And that was his line. Yeah. When the monkey die, everybody cry.
Everybody cry. Yeah. I've heard that, but I've heard that, but didn't know the exact reference, honestly.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, it was an answer to why do remakes, right? Why? Because he was the king of remakes. He was the one he was the first person to really do a remake. So for the question that he would pose was, why do you think people respond to this film so much? Like, what is it about this film, King Kong, that people respond to? And that was his response.
Summed it up so concisely and accurately.
Yeah.
One line.
He was good like that. Yeah, he had some really he had some things that he said when I worked with him that were they were really out of another era. You really understood that as a producer, he was at one point anyway, he was a star maker. He could really pick up the phone and call anybody. And honestly, he could get on a plane. As he said, I get on the plane, I go to New York, I go to the burlesque show, I make a star. I mean, he would say things like,
just speak them into existence.
Stuff like that. And I'm like, it's 2008. Okay. All right. Sounded like it was 1956 or
He's
something.
An old school.
But, he was an old school guy. Yeah. I mean, there's good and bad with that too, but I did have some, but Peter, you're being very, very humble as well. I have to say, I mean, Peter is a multi-talented, I think you're kind of polymathic in your own, well, we'll say across the arts anyway. I think you are kind of you have so many different talents that you bring to it. And I also love that you remember all the names of all the creators and people and everybody, because I have name blindness. Is part of my way my brain wiring works is I cannot remember my own name. But this is why I think everybody now knows me as Blue. But Peter, you know me so long that you call me Blarime, which is my first name. But
speaking to Peter's creativity, I just wanted to tie in with the mention of the Alien movie. Your drawing, Peter, on Sigourney Weaver was amazing, which I'll link to in the episode notes to your Instagram for both of you. just for folks to check out. But I just thought it was amazing.
Thank you. I do like to draw, and I'm learning to paint at the Art Students League. I've just been learning for, the past 20 years. I've been dabbling in painting. The problem is you have to keep going consistently.
Right. With anything, right? Any creative endeavor. Blu, before we move off of this, I actually wanted to ask you a question. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, related to your previous works. I read that you worked on My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which is one of my wife's favorite movies, and you were the director of development for that feature. So I just wanted to ask if you could tell us a bit about that experience in that role.
Wow. Well, actually, I will be honest with you. I came into that experience when the film had been shot and they didn't know what to do with it. It was sitting on a shelf for a really long time. They could not get the film. They couldn't sell this film into a theater, and really were trying to figure out what to do with the film, or are they just going to go, they almost went straight to video with that film, which would have just been, can you imagine if this film just went into anonymity as a straight to video? It was kind of an unusual time because people didn't self-release. People didn't four-wall films, four-walling meaning that go out and rent the theaters out and distribute the feature yourself. And so they were just trying to find out different ways to do things. So one of the things, there were very few people who worked at Gold Circle Films where I worked at the time. There were five executives, and that was it. And we would just sit in the office of these weekly meetings, going through our entire, roster of unreleased films at that time. And we went and tested My Big Fat Greek Wedding, and it had this unbelievably high testing number. It got like a 95, which is unheard of. Out in, I think it was in Calabasas that we tested it, and so the idea was like, well, we can go straight to video. We can do a European release with no North American release, and the reason why was because, to be honest with you, they were saying, oh, we don't know how we're going to sell Mia Vardalos, and who's this other guy? He's kind of like, he used to be on Northern Exposure. You don't really know him anymore. We can't sell this film in North America. And yet, to really make that release work, you needed a North American release at that time. So it was going to be straight to video otherwise.
That's insane.
So what we kind of went through were a number of scenarios. And one of them was really about sort of modeling what could it look like if we did our own theatrical release and rented out the theaters. So that became part of my job. I think, really at that time I was focused on remakes and adaptations because of my previous writing work, and which is ultimately why I ended up working with Dino De Laurentiis later in development. But at that time, because they had like 19 films sitting on a shelf, they were really, really much more focused on like, what do we do for a distribution strategy right now? I can get into so many details about why that happened and get into what you do and don't want to do when you're a brand new company with lots of money. You want to first go out and get a distribution deal with a studio at that time, but that's not what they did. So they ended up with all these films like that sitting on a shelf. And so we just said, we've got to take this film and let's release it, And so part of my job was to help model that out and see where we would release, what that release might look like. And we were looking at cities like New York City, Chicago, Boston, where there were big Greek communities, and saying, well, let's just release it to let's release it to 100 theaters and just see how it does. And that's all it took. And it was just the timing. It was post 9/11. People were very kind of depressed. There was really a vacuum in the market. And people were just dying for comedy at the time. They wanted to laugh. And we released it that summer after 9/11, before the anniversary, of course, of the first anniversary of 9/11. And people just ate it up. There wasn't anything like it that summer that was being released.
Yeah, and it wound up
really all it took it.
It wound up going on to being if I'm not mistaken, the largest grossing rom-com in history.
Yes. It cost us $2.6 million to make. $2.6 million to make it, and it costs probably that much to market it out or whatever, as it usually does. It made $286 million.
Wow!
Initially, so it made 100x. it's just like winning the lottery or something. It doesn't,
Right.
I can't even take credit for that. So
That's an amazing story from a creative perspective of sticking to your guns, going with your gut, knowing that it's good and wanting to get it out the way it deserves to be out.
going with your gut and going with a creator, right, who she had done that as a one-woman show. See, here's where my name blindness comes in. Oh, my God. Tom Hanks' wife, Playtone.
Rita Wilson. Rita Wilson.
Right.
Rita Wilson. Thank you. I'm so sorry. Oh, Rita, I'm sorry. Rita Wilson, had seen it, and Rita Wilson is, she's Greek by background and just loved the story and wanted to support this creator. And I think we need to do more of that. Right now we're really stuck in this sort of glut of material that has to be based on other material or has to have something attached to it to get made. I get it from a marketing perspective because I had to work in that realm too. But, I understand the mechanics of it, but at the same time, it leaves so much on the table in terms of creatives. There are just so many great stories, original stories out there. And I do think that the pendulum, I hope, will swing at some point back to that rather than trying to regurgitate everything all the time.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. There has to be a balance ultimately, right? Between the financial realities of a film, but also with the leaning more so on the creative side, in my opinion. I mean, look what like Ryan Coogler's Sinners did and films like that kind of give hope to that type of, moving a little bit more away from the cookie cutter, has to be based on previous IP type of stories, which there's still a place for as well.
And then then you get into this game, which people will play, which is we have to have it based on something. So, maybe you write the script and then you write the book and then you say, oh, the book was first. I mean, I've been in that, I won't get into it, but I've been in that situation where, things like that have happened and I'm like, oh, okay. So it just becomes a game, and at the end of the day is the work is the work and, the quality of the work, that hopefully, is what ultimately rises to the top for people. But, it's a film business, right? We understand there's the business side of it. But it's definitely evolved over the years. It's evolved in these ways that are, I think, it's what, in some ways, is what is hurting the film business right now in Los Angeles, where we're seeing the film business get really hammered here. And I think part of it is this kind of lack of respect for the creative.
Agreed. Definitely couldn't agree more. And Peter, I wanted to bring you in. I wanted to ask you about Kathy Bates. She's amazing. I love her in Misery, The Blind Side, Titanic, which you mentioned the Blu worked on as well. Mm-hmm. How was it to co-write Relative Strangers, a screenplay that you wrote, which starred her and Danny DeVito?
It was a great experience. I mean, it was a challenging experience to write this film because I live in LA and my co-writer Greg lived. Now he's in Chicago, but he was in. Did I just say I was in LA? I'm in New York. I'm in New York, and Greg was in LA. So we were writing it back and forth. This was a long time ago now, so there was no way for us to do live collaboration. We didn't even have Zoom. None of that stuff existed back then. So we talked on the phone. I would write, and then I actually used to send hard copies off to Greg. I remember I would mail them.
Oh, wow. So no Google Notes or anything like that existed.
None of this stuff really existed. So this is like in 2001, we started this process of collaborating together on this. So it was tough. I will say this too. I was brand new to writing. The only thing I could really do was I could be funny. I didn't know anything about structure. I didn't know anything about anything. Greg was basically writing the story, and my job was to provide dialogue. Of course, I had strong opinions about story as well. But he was sort of the senior person in the situation because he had written the parents. He was the reason that this was happening. And he was doing me an incredible favor. I mean, this was just an incredible thing to even be invited into the world of professional screenwriting. Also, as you just mentioned, because it was a factor, my younger brother had cancer. So as my younger brother was dealing with cancer and ultimately dying of cancer, I was having to write this screenplay. It was very... the famous quote from Dickens, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. That's how it was at that time in my life. The same week I was invited to work on my first professional screenplay, my younger brother was diagnosed with cancer.
So sorry
these things were coinciding. Thank you. So there were times where I was literally but here's the thing too. I had to be there for my brother. I had to be there. I had to be, of course. I wasn't not going to be there. At the same time, I couldn't drop this opportunity because I knew that this was something that was I couldn't. It was a once in a lifetime thing.
Right.
I couldn't say to Greg, "Thank you so much for inviting me, but I have an illness in my family, so I can't do it." I wasn't going to do that, so I did both at the same time. And there were times where I would literally be writing the script by my brother's bedside as he was being treated for cancer. So it was a very intense time in my life, maybe the most intense time ever in my life. And it was difficult to write because I disagreed with a lot of creative decisions, and I was having to learn to rewrite something, which I didn't know how to do. And I felt like it was uphill the whole time. It never leveled off. The hill never leveled. It was a steep incline the whole time. And then eventually we finished it, and it got to a place where everybody was happy, and the producers were happy that Greg was working with. And we said, okay, we're fine, we're good. The script is complete. And then I moved to LA. My little brother subsequently passed away, unfortunately. I moved to LA for a couple of reasons. One, because I felt that the film was starting to come together and there was sort of a reason to be there. I also, to be quite frank, because of everything that had just happened, I think I wanted to go to a new place and look at different things and just be completely away from the world that I had been living in. I needed to sort of start over.
Change of scenery.
Yeah, change of scenery, change of life.
Right.
And so to answer your question, yeah, it was challenging to write the screenplay. It was difficult. It never really got easier, but we've ultimately finished it. I will say this too. A lot of people don't like the collaboration with studios. We made this movie with a studio called Millennium New Image. I didn't mind getting notes and incorporating them. And in fact, I thought the notes we got from them were pretty good. And I didn't mind sitting in the room and having the notes sort of, to me, it was part of the collaborative process. And I actually kind of enjoyed it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the reasons why, if you're a writer, I think that puts you miles and miles ahead, because one of the biggest problems is that people, and I know this from being in the room as a development executive, people didn't know I was a writer or anything. Didn't know that I'd written, had things produced. That obviously I was a ghostwriter, so it wasn't under my name, unfortunately. But they would come in and they'd be offended, right? They'd say, "Oh, who's this development executive telling me what to do?" And of course, I never said anything. That wasn't my position to say, I write too, But it was such a block. And a lot of times things didn't get made because the writers just could not sit down and put their ego aside and say, let's talk through these notes. Let's collaborate, right?
Yeah, you're not a novelist. It's a particular form of writing, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it is. It's collaborative by nature. And so I really think in any part of the industry, and I'll say this too, that goes for like, when you're, I studied Meisner technique at the Baron Brown studio here in Los Angeles. And for 2 years, I studied acting. And it's the same thing. It's like, you have to be very open, right? You have to it's like, what do we need? What's the goal here that we can all get around? We all have our eye on the prize at the end of the day. And yeah, of course, argue for your point of view. Have a strong point of view, have a strong aesthetic always. Make sure that you have developed what your vision is strongly, but also understand that you are working with groups of people and everybody's adding a piece to that in order to elevate the overall, in this case, the overall feature, or maybe it's series, to make sure that that is the best possible experience for the audience. The audience, that's who is, at the end of that rainbow for me, is how are we going to make this the best possible? And I always say this to Peter, how do we get it to the height of the meaning, the height of the moment? Yeah. And, sometimes you write something and I say, what do you think, Peter? And he'll say, I think it's pretty good. And I go, could we up this?
Yeah.
a little more?
Better.
I want to get it. Yeah. why not take it to the next level?
You wanted to go beyond pretty good. You wanted to get the most out of it.
Absolutely, and
I'm never. Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
And that's sort of when I write with Peter. The goal is that, because we do live in two separate cities. I live in Los Angeles and Peter lives in New York. And so often what we'll do through our writing process is, I'll say, I'll take this scene and you take that scene and let's get together in a few days and talk through it. And then sometimes we'll switch or we'll give each other notes. The idea is not that I go off and write on my own, come back and it's like, it's great. That's good enough, or that's great. Let's just leave it there. It's a collaborative process. So what I'm looking for and what he's looking for when we come back together is I want you to, not ruthlessly, but I want you to pick it apart and see what you can add to that to elevate the piece, right? What's the point of a collaboration if two people aren't coming together to make something better than each one of them could do separately?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to highlight a point that you both mentioned where we kind of see the juxtaposition of the example with My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which almost went straight to video, as you mentioned, Blu.
Yeah.
Just be leaning too much so on the financial or bottom line or just like the business side of show business. And then swinging the pendulum to the other side, you have many films and TV shows that never get made just because the creative is like steadfast and stuck in their ways and doesn't want to budge an inch. When, again, to the point we made earlier, finding that equilibrium, that balance is where we should be, especially in this medium of like movie and film, where it is much more so collaborative than, like Peter's point, to writing a novel, for example.
Yeah, you really have to have. I mean, maybe we're getting philosophical, but personalities. Personalities are the thing that can get in the way
right.
of the process. I mean, obviously, we want to bring our personalities to things, but when we put our personalities above our sort of principles, I think that's where we get off the beaten path. I mean, we get off track rather. So we always want to have like, what is it that what is the true goal? For me, it's really coming to the process with my values, with my principles in mind, and not my ego. That my personality is what will get in the way of the process if I allow it to. Anybody will be in that position. So when I come to the collaborative, when I come to the table with Peter or with anybody, my thing is, what hat can I put on her that's going to be most valuable to the process? And, what can I bring? Let me put my ego to the side. And what can I do here that's going to be about sort of the greater good in terms of the creative process? And so I think Peter and I do that really, really well. I think Peter, you and I, Peter is such you're one of my favorite people, Peter. You're one of my favorite people. You're such a good person, and it's like, it's easy to work with somebody who's such a good person and who's so talented and intelligent. It's easy. And it helps, me feel like, hey, I don't have to carry any burden here alone. I'm not carrying the weight for somebody else. Sometimes that can happen in a creative process where somebody really kind of doesn't pull their weight, or they're not really bringing that much to it. And you're sort of like, I'm pulling all the weight over here. And that's never the way that I feel with Peter. I always feel like we're both bringing everything to the process.
And we have each other's backs too. And that's sort of the partnership thing.
That's awesome. I love that for you guys. Yeah. And this episode is shaping up to be a masterclass in collaboration. So take notes, folks. And I wanted to ask you guys a bit about your influences. So both of you have backgrounds that blend different disciplines. Blu with your gothic, character, explorations, VFX, Peter with comedy, screenwriting, teaching. How do those early experiences continue to shape the way that you guys approach horror today? Because to me, from the outside looking in, it's kind of like a melting pot of different lenses of creativity coming together, which is exciting, seemingly for me from the outside looking in. So just wanted your take on how those experiences shape your approach today.
Big question. That's a big question. Well, yeah, because there are a lot of different influences. I guess there's the influence of comic book storytelling, which is visual. It's the combination of word with the image. I guess I've brought that into film writing. As far as storytelling in general, comedy and horror, I think, have something in common in that they both rely on a kind of a cathartic response. They both utilize surprise, a bit of a shock. It's either the shock of the scream or the shock of the laugh. They do seem to have a relationship, comedy and horror, which I don't fully understand, but I know that I'm not the first person that works in both arenas. The guy who wrote The Exorcist, William Peter Blatty, had written only comedy before he did The Exorcist.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
So yeah, he had written only comedy. He had written like one of the Pink Panther movies in the 60s. There must be some relationship that maybe I don't fully understand, but I think it has to do with the visceral reaction that we have as well. You definitely get a reaction
100%.
right away. It's not neutral. Like the first thing that I really wrote was sketch comedy, actually. When I first began to put material in front of an audience, it was through the venue of sketch comedy. And the great thing about that is that we were going out into comedy clubs and we were getting that reaction immediately. You knew right away if your work was connecting or not because you either get a laugh or you didn't.
Well, that's it, right? It's that horror and comedy. They're reactions. They're not just genre, right?
Yeah.
They're actual. Horror actually is an actual reaction, right? You react with horror, right?
Yeah.
And I think they are very. You hit the nail on the head when you said visceral. They both have this almost primal, visceral reaction, and it's almost reflexive. It's almost reflexive, and that's not, what necessarily other genres bring, right? It's not that. It doesn't have that immediacy that laughter or the scream have, right?
Yeah.
So I think there is something really primal about it, and I think that's what really attracts people to it.
Yeah, they're twins in some weird way.
That's awesome. That's an interesting blend there.
And I think too, when in terms of when I was growing up, I was very into. I didn't bring this up at all, but I was very into poetry and Victorian literature. I was very into gothic Victorian literature, and my favorite book is Frankenstein. And actually, recently I had my daughter this past year. She read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Which was also great. And these novels had a lot of influence on me as well. Like literature has had a lot of influence on me, and my own. I will say, even my own personal history, my own personal tragedies. All of those things come into. We tend to think of horror. I think some people, when you say horror, they think, oh, blood, guts, and gore, and that's all it is.
Usually, I hear that all the time.
Yeah, and it's so much. Well, at least for I think you and I, Peter, it's so much deeper than that.
Yeah.
We're really trying to touch something very deep inside of our human sort of experience that is deeply emotional and sort of the inner traumas that we are dealing with in life. Those are the things that I think that for Peter and I, Peter, I think you can speak to this too, but this idea of we kind of tend to go through these sort of moral or ethical questions when we're writing. And I think because we are trying to dig deep into our own psyches to understand, what is this human experience? We're doing it through these genres of comedy and horror.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm much more interested in the ideas than the blood and guts. I like the ideas that you can explore with horror.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a little bit more. We can get into it later. I'm sure you'll ask us about this, Tony, but about the piece that we did write, and we can get a little bit more into kind of what the influences are from our backgrounds that kind of brought us to this particular story and to the idea of even doing a podcast. I think a lot of that will come out in that.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed. We can actually shift to there. And then I want to circle back to a couple other questions that I have here. So you've described your work as kind of a co-creation with audiences and pulling them into dark places that we hesitate to explore. How do you balance giving audiences what they expect from horror while maintaining like an element of surprise? And we can definitely, with that, get into, as you mentioned, the creative aspects of The Night Visitor.
Yeah, I think that, wow, that's a good question. I mean, I think,
very good question.
You know, for me, what I'm trying to do is understand that I too am a fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I definitely want to hear the perspective of the storyteller. You know, I think one of the things that I feel, maybe this is just my own generation or something, but I do feel like, you know, there was a time where we as filmmakers were trying to teach people how to see differently. And I really still look at it that way. So I'm definitely trying to bring my eye to it and convey my point of view to the audience. But at the same time, you know, I remember being a fan. I am an audience member regularly. You know, I go to the movie theater by myself. I love that. I just go in the movie theater and enjoy the experience for myself. I love being around strangers in the dark and watching films and seeing and feeling and hearing the reactions. And so to me, it's like, I love that feeling of just the excitement and the anticipation of being in the theater and having the goosebumps rise. You're so anticipating this story that, you know, you've just been dying to see maybe, but understanding also that sometimes you want that experience to continue after the film is over. So it's giving, for me anyway, it's giving the audience enough to really engage them while they're watching it. And then when they leave the theater, they're thinking back on it and going, wait a second, okay, this happened and then that happened. And wait, I kind of want to know more. Wait, what is that whole world about? I want to know all the rules of that world. I want to explore this even more. And this is where I think the modern era has come in such an interesting way with fandoms. You know, we have given people platforms, especially online, of course, to share out their own fan stories or share out, you know, their own perspectives on what happened and really connect with other fans. So I guess I would go there. I don't know if that answers your question, but to me, that is almost as equally as vital as the experience, you know, of watching a film, right? It's equally vital to have that fandom that continues on, where people can continue to explore and even possibly co-create, right, in that world that you've created for them.
Absolutely.
So we're making the rules, but we're letting people say, okay, well, now we know what the four walls of this world are, and now we get to play inside of it, you know, and let them have that as a sandbox.
Absolutely. There's a quote that I'm going to butcher that reminds me of, which is something to the effect of, when you create something, or like for me, for example, with like my writing with books, three things are created: your creation, and then the reader's interpretation of your creation, and then the collaboration of both, like when there's interaction around that creation.
I would say,
and I'll say another thing.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, just was going to say, the other thing that I will say as well is that when we go back to that whole conversation about adaptations and remakes and things being based on other things, which I worked in that realm for a long time. You know, I've had people come to me and say, I hate adaptations. They're never as good as the book. I hate it when they do remakes. Every single person who has read a book has a different version of that book. Right, they have recreated that book in their minds. They've recreated the characters. They know what they think they look like. So when you're casting it, they say, oh, that's not how I imagined it, or, oh, that's exactly who I thought I imagined in that role. Every single person gets to co-author that creative piece with you, and whether it's a film or a book or whatever it is, right? Whatever type of media it might be. So this idea that, you know, adaptations or remakes or anything is bad, I want to be careful and not, I'm going to retract a little bit of what I said previously, just to say those still have a place in the world. We still need to tell these stories and maybe even retell these stories sometimes. But make no mistake, every time somebody sits in the movie theater with your movie, there's a different movie playing in their minds, in each person's mind.
Also, in a way, we've been retelling the same story throughout time to some degree. If you go back, way back, I'm saying, you know what I mean, to the original stories, the original myths. In some fashion, we've been sort of retelling the same things,
Absolutely.
It's just been kind of
all the way back to Sumeria,
Exactly. And I wanted to add this too to answer my take on your question there about how do you balance your point of view with what the audience expects. I would also say this: you have to sort of trust yourself too. You have to trust that you're not so far off. Your tastes are going to be not so far off from other people that they won't be able to understand it. I remember I was watching it was like the audio commentary on Young Frankenstein, and Mel Brooks was saying this, which I thought was interesting. He said, "When I make a movie, I'm the audience. The only audience I know is me. It's the only audience I understand. So I'm going to assume that I'm not so different from the rest of the world that they're not going to get this." I kind of like that.
I like that as well.
Yeah, you have to trust the audience. Yeah, you really have to trust the audience, right? I mean, we go through that when we're writing too. Sometimes where it's like, let's not overwrite this. Let's trust that our audience can understand what we're trying to convey.
Yeah.
Right. Give your audience credit, and you are an audience member yourself at the end of the day, right? You're technically you're creating something that you haven't seen and that you want to make exist. So
what would I like? What would I accept? What would excite me?
Exactly. Peter, I wanted to ask you. You've emphasized grounding the fantastical in reality and making the incredible seem credible. So I wanted to ask you.
I love it.
Right. I wanted to ask you, what techniques do you use in your writing or dialogue or structuring of scenes to create that believability? Because one thing, circling back to The Night Visitor, is how the fantasy aspects of the horror, are really grounded by the historical elements of it.
Well, I credit Blarime for much of that historical richness. But I think that basically create a believable universe and then have weird things start happening, essentially, right? So, if you remember the setup to Poltergeist, right? The old Poltergeist in 1982. What was so brilliant about that movie is that first we establish a family that we absolutely believe in. It's recognizable, we believe in it, and then start having weird things happen so that it can feel real to us. We can really experience it. And I guess in creating it, I would just ask myself, well, how would I respond if something really crazy happened, Because the worst thing in a film is where you see people reacting, almost taking weird things for granted, where it's crazy things are happening, but they're not reacting realistically to it. I feel if you want to bring the audience into it, to make it an emotional experience, they've got to react like human beings.
Right. Absolutely.
But I would say, yes, first you lay the groundwork of reality, and then you slowly start to bring the weird stuff in.
Awesome. I like that. Now, both of you have worked in, as we've discussed, in film, TV, and now we're turning to audio. What excites you most about the horror storytelling in this medium of podcasting, which is largely audio based? And just from a technical perspective, if I can add to that question, do you guys storyboard sound similar to how in film visuals are storyboarded, or how does that piece of the collaboration work?
Well, I can say one thing just to the first part, which is one, I think Peter, actually, you can probably speak to radio shows, which I think you even more than I would say expanded into that a little bit earlier than me. I mean, I think you can talk to that a little bit more, but I think for me, what I saw was that podcasts really had a huge explosion out in the market. And I started also listening to a lot of audiobooks, and I was like, when are they going to do some dramatic readings of these audiobooks? And they started doing these kind of like, minorly dramatic readings. And I was like, this could be so much more rich. This could be such a rich tapestry of sound if you wanted to invest in the platform that way, you could. And I heard maybe like a few podcasts out there that had tried to do some more realistic soundscapes. And I just felt that one of the things I do, and I should mention this, is that I also have a technical side to my career. And I have consulted for a long time in the area of sort of future technologies and platforms. So, and that's a whole other part of my life and a whole other story. But because of that, I'm used to predicting future trends. So when I was looking out at podcasts, I really saw a kind of potential second sort of explosion of narrative pieces that could be put out as really rich, immersive entertainment, right? So a couple of years ago, I was talking to Peter, and I think it was a couple of summers ago, you had released the other film that you wrote was Greg, Puppy Love. And after that, you got in touch with me and said, you could tell that story, but it was like, hey, I really want to write with you again, and let's write something together. And I was like, here, we've written so much stuff. Let's get something out that we've already written and love, and let's do it as an audio piece. And I think at first it was a little bit of a hard sell with you. You were like, okay, I don't know. It took a minute to get you kind of like into it. I want to say it was like maybe a good 6 months before it was like, okay, we're actually going to try to do this.
Yeah, probably hemming a little bit on it.
But I somehow I think we got there together finally. I think it was pretty much like 6 months or so. And, so a couple of years ago, I really felt like this trend would be coming. And I do see it growing. I do. But I think you can add a lot to this.
Yeah, podcast is huge.
Oh, podcast. I think that our cast.
Podcast is huge. And so is podcast.
Yep.
I'm definitely a fan.
Yeah. Well, podcasting is interview, right? Like what you're doing, Tony, was interviewing on podcasts. This is kind of where podcasts are biggest, right? In this interview space.
Right.
But I just see so much, more, right? I see more for it. I see more opportunities there that can be explored creatively. And I hope that people will listen to what we've done and be inspired and decide to do their own. That would be great. Absolutely.
There's definitely room for much more of that. I agree with you there, Blu. There was actually a podcast that I wanted to mention. No, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to make sure Peter also, Peter, I think you had you did have a live radio show at one point. So I just wanted to mention that.
Well, yeah, I mean, what I was going to say, what inspired us particularly to create our audio drama, I mentioned that I had written a film with Greg Leanne, who I mentioned earlier, called Puppy Love. I'm hesitating because I think it was really called Puppyhood in the 19th. So we wrote this movie for BuzzFeed Features. And I think I felt a bit inspired, having been hired for another feature. But at the same time, it made me look back at my own work, the work that I actually cared the most about, these stories that I had written with Blarime. And it made me think, I really, really, really want to tell my own stories, because I didn't want to spend the rest of my life writing stories for other people that were just jobs. I mean, I'm proud of Puppy Love, but it was a job. I wanted to really, so many of our own stories, and I had written these, Blarime and I had written these great horror stories together. So we decided, let's take one of them and find some way to tell the story. And rather than do a short film, we arrived at this idea of the audio drama. And we thought, we could be much more affordable and we could do it with sound. And actually having now created it, I think it's great. I mean, if I may say so myself, and as far as, creating this world of horror through sound, which is so immersive and it allows the audience it really engages with their imagination, perhaps even in a different way than a film would do, because it is just sound. And so you can really conjure up the image yourself. I think it's very powerful. I mean, I'm so proud of what we created.
Wanted to,
it's the
right?
best piece of art I've ever made.
I mean, that you've said before, and I mean, that's like a testament to the platform itself. I mean, it's just that it was so above and beyond our expectations, I think, when we started this. How far we could take it, just how far we could take the sound, and really on a very, very modest budget, what we could do was just immense. And, you know, a lot of horror, I mean, obviously we can talk about just sound in the genre of horror. You could have probably have an entire series on that. But I really feel like we tapped into something, because, you know, you can basically shut your eyes and
visualize it.
Thing feels like you're watching. Yeah. It's like, you know, it's like a movie playing. Absolutely. But you shut your eyes and you just got this really, really rich soundtrack going. You're like, wow, you know, I feel like you're there, right?
Yeah, you can project yourself.
And there's something almost, it's almost, there's more opportunities actually in a way for, I mean, a good scare, because there's so much that depends on these sounds and sound effects. You know, you're basically going in blind when you're listening to it. So some moments actually, to me, have more shock value. But I digress. Anyway, Peter, I wanted to also mention, though, that I think Peter's being humble too. You know, Peter has probably I'm going to say, Peter, that I think you have even a bigger appreciation for old radio dramas as well. I think you produced a piece that was kind of a radio show at one point. So
yes, I did.
You've had, in a way, more previous experience.
You're reminding me. I forgot that I had done that. Oh, that's right. I did do that. Yes, I did. I did that.
We're like remembering each other's, you know. And so having that experience of putting on a live radio show, I mean, that's something that you'd already done. And
I had done this with a feature horror comedy.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what was the name of that one, Peter?
Yeah.
The horror comedy is called Ackerman and Associates Meet Dracula. It's about realtors who end up selling a home to Dracula. He's moved to LA. And it's about real estate, and it's about the wheeler-dealer nature of that and the trouble that these two guys sort of get themselves into. So a horror comedy, obviously. But
gotcha.
That's a feature that I've written as well.
Yeah, what you guys created with The Night Visitor, I couldn't agree more. Within the podcast medium, it's great. It is lacking in the space, and it also serves as a proof of concept as well, because it doesn't necessarily have to be there. It could also, you know, evolve or into other mediums from there. And I wanted to mention to you guys a podcast kind of within that like theater of the mind type of historical fiction podcast called Bronzeville that I loved. It was set in Chicago, 1940s. It was like two like rival families that were kind of like the underbelly of like running numbers and liquor and like speakeasy spots and stuff like that. Within there, they had Lawrence Tate was one of the voice actors, Lawrence Fishburne, and it did really well and only did 2 seasons, which I was disappointed about, because I think they got like a television deal from that, which honestly I haven't seen come out yet. Obviously those things take time, but yeah, that's just a testament to how one thing could evolve into something else, you know, whether intended or unintended.
Yeah, I'll have to look for that. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah,
you know, there was another thing I wanted to mention. Sorry, just to backtrack just a tiny bit. One of the values, I think, of audio drama in terms of a horror piece, you know, growing up for Blarime and I and our generation, I'm not sure how old you are, Tony, but
41.
You know, okay, so you're a little bit younger than us. You know, in the old days, you didn't see the monster that much. You didn't see him in broad daylight. They sort of hid the monster, and you sort of got him little by little, and maybe by the end, the monster was revealed, like in the original Alien, right?
Or like,
and there's so much shadow. Yeah, and in Jaws, for example, there's a power, I think, to not showing the audience everything. You want to show them just enough, but I think you want to leave space for them to meet you halfway. because their imagination is going to be so much more intense than what you could actually show them. And I wish there were more of that now, because now we have the technology to literally just show them everything. We could show them the whole monster from front to back, from beginning to end. But there's a value, I think, in sort of holding back and letting it little by little. You know what I mean? Sort of.
Absolutely.
You know, I think there's a lot of power.
You know what's crazy, Peter? I went to Universal City Walk the other day to go watch a movie with my daughter, and we're passing by the 50th anniversary Jaws. You know, poster, which is playing up there now, and I looked, and it said that Jaws was PG. I
can't believe that movie. You see a man get eaten by a shark. No, I can't believe. We just watched it again this summer. We just watched it. You see Quint get eaten alive. How did that get a PG?
I don't know. I'm like, they put it. It said PG, and I was like, no, something's wrong. This cannot possibly be PG. But
I know.
I remember we would be frightened by commercials sometimes. Remember, like the Jaws commercial.
Yeah.
Just by itself was like, oh my God, don't look. You know, it was terrifying. And there were some films like that where even the trailers were like,
Carrie. Carrie. They would show Carrie. So we're going back to 1976. You'd see Carrie when she gets the blood dumped on her, and I think they would only show those ads after a certain time. But I remember if I had the misfortune being up at that time and I looked at it, I was like, okay, you just destroyed my life. I don't even know how to live in this world anymore, but I've just seen.
Like now it's just like you can turn the TV on and it's just like sheets of blood everywhere. It's amazing to me what kids are exposed to now versus when we were kids. Like, I mean, I had a friend who fainted. She fainted because she watched somebody on TV get like stabbed. It wasn't even bloody, you know. It was just like this action of it, and she like passed out. She's like, oh, you know. This was what was frightening for us because we just weren't exposed the way that we are now. So like, it to me was hilarious that we saw the PG thing on the on Jaws.
Yeah, I mean, Bambi is PG. You know what I mean? Like you know, kids movies are PG. I don't understand this. Right.
Since you guys, I have a couple questions left for you guys, and I just want to say I really appreciate you both. No worries at all. Yeah. I'm actually about to go on a tangent myself, so based on something you said, I just wanted to thank you guys for taking the time and coming on the show. It's been great so far.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Speaking of Carrie, have you guys read Stephen King's On Writing? His writing memoir?
And I loved it.
Same. And I've told this story so much on the podcast. So for folks that listening that have heard it before, apologies, but I think it's a great one. But it's just the story around how Carrie came to be, where Stephen King wrote a draft of it and wound up like crumpling it up and throwing it in his wastebasket. And he lived like in a two-wide trailer or something like that with his wife at the time. And his wife was just cleaning up one day and took it out of the trash and read it and told him, hey, I like this story that you wrote. You should, flesh it out, actually write it, not throw it away. And he was at the time, living in a trailer. I think he was like a substitute teacher. Yep. And, before Stephen King became Stephen King, and wise man, listened to his wife's advice and wound up writing it. And that's the story that, fast forwarding a bit, he winds up getting a call from his agent or manager saying that it was optioned for something like $400,000 or like something like that.
Yeah.
And the rest is history. But
he supposedly sort of collapsed. He supposedly collapsed against the wall when he heard the amount.
Right.
Just because he was living on like nothing. He couldn't even imagine that much money.
Exactly. And if I remember correctly, it was like Mother's Day or his wife's birthday or some holiday, and like all the stores were closed, but he was like so excited, and his wife was visiting her mother, if I'm not mistaken. So he just went out to like the only place that he could find open, and like went to a pharmacy just to buy her something like as like a gift. And I just think that's an amazing story.
It's a great book, On Writing by Stephen King.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you guys, I've heard that horror works best when it's something about real fears. So, like, what truths or like anxieties are you guys trying to surface in this podcast, whether it be around like politics or family dynamics, technology, or otherwise?
Mm. So Peter, I don't know if you want to take this first, or do you want me to
No, I think you have
talk
something
about?
to say, but I can add to it. Or do you want me to take it?
I would just say for this, well, I would say, if you see how we are, we're those two chipmunks from the cartoon that they're just, no, after you. So I think for this first piece, we wrote this a long time ago, actually. I won't even say how long ago it was because it's almost embarrassing how long ago it was when we started writing this. We adapted this piece for a podcast. And now we've adapted it again, Peter, because we've written a screenplay from this now. So for feature
awesome
screenplay. So this has come in 3 different versions now. And really what's come out of it, I mean, I can at least speak to the part for me. This particular podcast episode takes place in the Accursed Mountains, which is a real place, the Accursed Mountains of Albania, at the end of World War II. And
Blarime,
I think the reason why...
half Albanian.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
I'm half Albanian, I'm half Turkish. So the political conversations around my dinner table when I was growing up were really interesting. But basically, my dad was obsessed with World War II because he was a very small boy when World War II began. He was 7 years old. And his first memories of like even seeing an airplane were when the Italians were invading. So those are his initial memories, and Nazis and all of that stuff. He was very obsessed with that time period. My family had interactions with Nazis, very scary. So that, as I was growing up, and I had an older father, so as I was growing up, unlike my peers, I had a parent that had lived through World War II and was still really haunted by it. And there was some sort of, I would say, there was little survivor's guilt from that time period, especially as Albania became, then communist, and then he escaped from communist Albania. And there's a lot of guilt around that, a lot of obsession over how World War II was really a turning point. So it does have a family tie for me, and an exploration of some of these themes about guilt and faith come into it, and really sort of the ethical questions around warfare were really of interest to me in particular. And so as Peter, as you alluded to earlier, I'm kind of a history nut. So I tried as much as I could, at least, to, and with Peter, make sure that the piece was historically as accurate as it could possibly be. And what I think we did was we really explored World War II from the perspective of German soldiers, and really tried to give kind of a different view on the German soldier from these 6 different perspectives of these 6 different soldiers. Really, give a much more 3-dimensional view of it. Because what I think of when I think of today, when I think of what's going on in the world today, I think that people look at World War II and think, right now anyway, that was a long time ago and this is now, and that could never happen here. Nothing like that will ever happen. And I remember being 7 years old and my dad getting upset about something and saying, you never know what will happen tomorrow. Everything that could change in a single day. And I remembered saying, Dad, what are you talking about? It was a very, very 1970s thing to say to your parent was, this is America. What are you talking? It's a free country. It's a free country, is what I said to my dad. And he's like, no, everything that could change in a day. Because when later I realized, much later, when I looked back, when he was 7 years old, things did change for him in a day. And, we're in an environment politically and socially right now that is really a potential powder keg, and where people don't see that we are slipping further and further into really, really scary, polarized territory. And so I think people have this idea that, well, that could never be me, because they think of Nazis as just mustache twirling oil can Harrys. And
Right.
The reality is a lot of these German soldiers got into it for a lot of different reasons and had different perspectives and still slipped into these morally questionable position as soldiers, right? They did things that were immoral and unethical that they themselves may not have believed they would have been doing, years earlier. So I just wanted to kind of explore that and really explore, like, are we capable of also having redemption? Because if we commit these types of sins, if we commit these types of atrocities, is there a redemption or not? And so and I won't give the answer to that away today, but that was really the exploration and why we would call this kind of a moral tale. So, Peter, I think you could probably jump in here, but that's sort of my perspective on this.
Crystallized it. Yeah, I think you crystallized it pretty well, actually. I think the story does explore moral guilt, a moral weight, you could say, or the weight of guilt. I think that's there throughout the whole story. That's sort of the background that sort of permeates the whole story, the weight of guilt.
And really kind of what defines monstrosity,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we can talk about monsters, and we can have them be these sort of fantastical creatures, but sometimes the real monster is within. And so that was a piece of this.
Yeah. I mean, I think you summed it up pretty well.
That's great. Thanks.
And we drew a lot on really folkloric. We really drew on folkloric horror for this piece. I mean, Peter and I have talked about this quite a bit. Peter, we kind of would say it's cosmic horror with really a lot of folkloric elements and dread kind of as part of the piece. And Peter, you mentioned this idea of like not revealing things, that there's something enticing about kind of really only revealing the monster really at the end.
Yeah, and slow reveal.
That's really
reveal going on throughout. Yeah. Which I think
you just don't know. You're like, what's happening here? As the audience, you're trying to figure out with these men, what is going on in this remote village that they've just sort of stumbled upon. And there are all these strange rituals happening and things happening that they don't really understand. And of course, they have their own intrinsic bigotry that's coming into that as well. And, what happens for them, I think is safe to say for us, Peter, is that they believe that they're in control, and slowly but surely, moment by moment, they start to lose that control until they realize their own world is really turned upside down by the horror of this, otherworldly village. And that's really kind of that's really what we were trying to bring to this particular piece. We really try to put in, I would say, I don't know if this gives it away, Peter, but to say that you get taken down a few different paths to try and understand what this might be.
Yeah.
And what we hope is that people come to the end and are truly kind of like, oh my God, I did not realize it was going to be this.
It has
and
a
that's
Twilight
kind
Zone
of the thing that we generally
structure.
try to do.
Yeah, it has
absolutely.
A Twilight Zone
We love the Twilight Zone.
The Twilight Zone.
Yeah,
definitely that kind of a structure. Yeah, I would say it's a slowly tightening knot, sort of, and then at the end is this reveal. This is what it is. This is what's happening here.
Nice. I definitely can't wait.
And we generally try to do that with all of the pieces. Yeah. We try to do that with each of these pieces that we've written, and we have a number of these. This is just the first episode, but the idea of the Night Visitor podcast was to have, it's an anthology. So these are each episode or each series. I'm going to say with these 4, we're releasing it in 3 episodes with a 4th kind of anchor about, sort of like this, how we came up with the concept and all of that. And then we have our next episode is just a completely different story. But each one of these has that kind of Twilight Zone structure, and you really kind of have that nice twist at the end. And it's really exploring these sort of moral questions is really what it's about.
That's awesome. So it's going to be 3 total, and then with a 4th kind of like director's cut, behind the scenes. how the sausage was made type of.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
three chapters to this particular episode. And then the next episode, also what we're doing is we're mashing up genres. So, the next episode, like we have another episode, for example, that's a Western story, but also dealing with a supernatural element to it.
That's amazing. That's
right,
amazing.
Right. It's like a Western ghost story.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
And guys, what do you hope that
Yeah.
listeners, after finishing The Night Visitor, come away with? Whether it be scared or exhilarated or thoughtful or all of the above. I'm leaning towards the latter with the thoughtful and kind of like introspective.
Yeah.
Based on what you guys
I
just
think
shared.
there's a haunting. I think it ends on a haunting note, and I think it gives you a lot to think about. First of all, because of the times that we're in right now, with the way things are swinging to the right, I think that's inherent. I think there's a political, social awareness to it. I think that's just inherent because of what's happening right now. And the funny thing is, we wrote this originally a really long time ago, before we were at where we're at politically.
It's like the
I hope
more
it will
things change, the
scare.
more
I
they stay
hope
the same.
I know. Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, sometimes you see things coming and you go, I don't know, like hopefully we can swing things away. I mean, one of the ideas about the reason for doing this is when I was growing up, and Peter, I think you feel the same way. We used to watch, Twilight Zone and the reruns, and we used to watch the Twilight Zone marathons. And, what they were really trying to do is it was for the social good. I really do think that.
Absolutely.
I think that
absolutely.
these stories were told for that purpose.
Rod Serling is another big hero of mine. Rod Serling created it on his own. He wanted to discuss things, so he was discussing them through that context.
Yeah, I mean, Peter, I think even, for you, Rod Serling, I mean, I've heard you talk about Rod Serling many, many, many times.
Yeah.
I think that he was an influential figure for both of us, and we grew up at a time when that type of storytelling was more prevalent. And we kind of wanted to bring that back, I think.
Yeah.
And, that's what we hope to do, is get people thinking. Of course, I want people to come out of it feeling blown away. I want people to come out of it going, holy crap.
Yeah.
Nice.
Let's put it this way. I think it gives you all the things that you want from a horror piece and more, because it also gives you something to think about.
I love it. I have two questions left for you guys to wrap. The first, more of a fun one, and the last one, more of a reflective question. So to you both, if you could bring one classic gothic or horror figure into the podcasting world, for example, whether it be like Dracula, Frankenstein, etc., who would that be and why?
Well, I'm a big fan of Dracula. It's funny, Blarime mentioned Frankenstein. I love Frankenstein, the book. And I love the book of Dracula. And to me, Dracula's never really been, I don't think anyone's ever really did a faithful adaptation of the book. And we've done so many versions of it. Not really. I think that I would love to, I don't know if I would do it, but I mean, actually I have this feature screenplay I mentioned earlier that interprets Dracula in the modern age. But I think Dracula, I'd love to do my own take on him.
Awesome. How about you, Blu?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult for me to even pick. I mean, I think, like Peter said, my favorite book is Frankenstein. I think I've also never seen a proper adaptation, to me anyway, of Frankenstein. I think they've always just missed the mark on that and on that character and on the monster's intelligence. I think that's just completely, it's just been so misinterpreted so often. I don't know that I would bring that into the podcast world. I mean, like Peter, I think Dracula, of course, first comes to mind, because to me, Dracula is like the most, I don't know, he's like the Superman of horror characters to me, there's nothing more quintessential than Dracula. And like Peter said, I don't think it's ever been done justice. I really don't think it's ever been really done justice.
Yeah. In fact, speaking of Frankenstein,
it's funny.
Guillermo del Toro just did Frankenstein. He's got Frankenstein coming out.
I know.
Oh, nice.
I know. I haven't seen it. I'm cross fingers on that because I love Guillermo del Toro. I think, everybody has their own interpretation again, so they come to it with something different, and I'm sure he'll come to it with his own personal, stamp on it, which will be very different. I don't know. Actually, I guess I'll stop there because I could wax on about this subject for a long time. I read a book recently, Carmilla, and that actually and I was really interested because it predecesses Dracula. Actually, it's earlier.
Oh wow!
And it was really great. I really loved it. Kind of a novella, Carmilla, and it's about a female vampire, which I thought was really cool. And actually, while I was reading it, I thought this should totally be like this character would be really interesting. Oh yeah. For podcast or screen or whatever, I think it could be great. How interesting. And we don't often get to see like a lead female vampire. I mean, we really don't. I'm trying to think of when the last time that I saw that depicted in any form, whether film or podcast or whatever, other than novel, of course. I haven't seen it. And yet I think that would be pretty amazing. I mean, we have Twilight, of course. I don't want to diss Twilight, but when I'm thinking of these stories, I guess I'm not thinking of like YA stuff, but I'm sure there's stuff in there. But it would be great to have something epic like that, female character.
I agree. I'd love to see that.
Same.
We have, and actually, Peter, I was going to say we have the other episode that we also does have a female lead, which the Unspeakable, which is a mashup of the old 30s and 40s,
Invisible Man.
Invisible Man kind of story meets kind of comedy, actually. Comedy, and there's a lot of comedy elements to that piece that we brought into that. So we have a lot of stuff coming up that explores these different types of characters. We try to put our own personal, of course, everybody does, right? We have also tried to put our own personal stamp on some of these traditional monsters and stories. And so hopefully that's what you'll see, or rather that's what you'll hear in our podcast.
Yeah.
Awesome. So final question for me, guys. If you could go back to your younger creative self in those nascent stages of getting into creativity, what advice would you give yourself?
Good question.
I'd say no fear.
Yeah.
Just like the biggest thing that gets in the way is hesitation.
Yeah.
And really being kind of like, afraid, being afraid to just get up and go and do the necessary things. Having structure for me was really, really important in terms of taking myself to the next level. And in that way, I wish I'd done that even earlier, was really understand that this is work. It's a job. It's something that you should go and do every day. It's not something that you do when you feel like it. You do it when you don't feel like it too. And, I think, there's also just understanding that you are coming into it with an open, really just absolutely open mind and, really open to trying anything, being experimental. But, what would you add?
I would say along the same lines, I would say trust yourself, go for it, try, be willing to not be great at it the first time you do, because you're probably not going to be willing to make mistakes. Don't let that stop you from trying. Understand that it's going to be a process of learning, but try and trust yourself. Like it's almost like a balance between trust yourself and keeping an open mind. Keep an open mind, but you express yourself. Just try and be willing to learn. That's what I would say.
Yeah, the willingness to learn for sure, and absolutely, and like you said, Peter, I think it's like we're trying to find that balance between not letting other people tell us who we are, and being open to learning from others, but at the same time really developing a point of view. And continuing to develop it.
Yeah.
And getting out of your own way, right? And something you guys said reminded me of advice from Stephen Pressfield, which is a writer that I follow. I
love him. Yes, the war of art.
The War of Art, absolutely. Yeah, and what he says about turning pro and showing up each day as if it's a job and taking it seriously through that lens.
Yes, I agree.
So, Blu, Peter, tell our listeners where they can find the upcoming first episode of The Night Visitor, the release date, which I believe is October 14th, your social medias, where folks can connect with you if they so choose.
Well, you can come to thenighteVisitor.com, which is our website, where we will have up-to-date release information. We will be releasing this on Apple Podcasts. So you'll see announcements there on our website and also on Instagram. We're at Night Visitor Podcast on Instagram. And like I said, with Apple Podcasts, and we're also releasing on Spotify and Podcasters. And we're also going to ultimately have the full episode available on YouTube on Halloween. But if you want to catch us, obviously prior to that, on October 14th, you can catch us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Awesome. And Peter, your socials?
It's at Peter Stass, my handle on Instagram, at Peter, and then I think it's _Stass. I should know these things, shouldn't I? You could definitely, you could connect with me anyway. If you go to the Night Visitor podcast, if you find us there, you're going to see my link right there, and then you can link to my Instagram.
I was just going to say also that I'm not really huge on social media. I do have an Instagram handle, which is my full name, which is Blarime, Blerime. But again, you can just go find it when you go to Night Visitor Podcast on Instagram. And I don't really post much on my personal, but I will try. I will try throughout this process. I generally tend to post off of our podcast Instagram, so you can find me there as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. That makes total sense. And for folks listening, per usual, I'll link to everything discussed in today's episode in the episode notes, the website, the socials, all the references that we made, so folks can check out the description of this episode wherever it is that you're listening, and connect with everyone. Peter, Blu, I just wanted to thank you once again for myself and Spun Today listeners. We really appreciate you guys coming on. It was a great conversation. I'm sure folks will gain a lot from it.
Thank you. This is great. This is really a nice experience. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this was fantastic, Tony. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate your listeners.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
And that was episode 291 of the Spun Today podcast. I hope you all enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. One of the things that really stood out to me, especially listening back, putting the show together, was how much respect Blu and Peter have for each other's craft. The way they talk about collaboration as a process for lifting each other up and making the work stronger feels like a lesson that we can all take away that goes way beyond writing and filmmaking. We also got into what makes horror powerful when it's done right. Because it's not just about the blood and the jump scares, although it definitely is that. But it's also about creating that uneasy mirror of ourselves and reflecting on our own fears and aspirations. Be sure to check out their new project, The Night Visitor. Episode 1 will be airing on October 14th, wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts. I'm definitely looking forward to that 4th episode very, very much. So as mentioned in the show, it's a 3-part series to the story itself, and then they are going to put out a 4th behind the scenes, kind of how the sausage is made type of episode, a director's cut version, if you will. And I love that kind of stuff, so I'm really looking forward to that. And I'll link to everything in the show notes per usual, so you can follow along and support their work. The main place you want to go to is thenighteVisitor.com. There you'll find links to Spotify, Apple, YouTube, so on and so forth. Blu and Peter, thank you very much once again for coming on the show. I can't wait for what is to come. And to you, my dear listeners, if you like this episode, go back into the archives and check out some of the other conversations I've had with writers and creators. As always, thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss the next one. Please stick around to listen to a few ways you can help support this show if you so choose. And until next time, folks, peace. What's up, folks? Tony here. I hope you're enjoying the Spun Today podcast as much as I enjoy producing it for you. Here are a few ways you can help support the show. You can support the Spun Today podcast financially by going to spuntoday.com/support. There you will find a couple different ways that you can do just that, some of which will actually not even cost you a dime, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. When you go to spuntoday.com/support, you'll see my affiliate link to Amazon. Click on it and it will take you to Amazon's website where you can do your shopping like normal. This will not cost you anything extra, but Amazon will pay me for driving traffic to their website. If you'd like to support the podcast more directly, you can do so by becoming a patron at spuntoday.com/support. You'll also find my Patreon link. This is where creators such as myself can be paid directly by patrons like you. You can either make a one-time donation or schedule recurring donations if you so choose. There are also different tiers of support, and depending on which you decide to go with, you'll also receive some perks in return, such as early access to content, free digital copies of my books, free bookmarks, etc. That is, again, by supporting via my Patreon link, available at spuntoday.com/support. Similar to Patreon, at that same location, you'll also find my Ko-fi link as well as my Buy Me a Coffee link. They work very similar to Patreon and are different ways that you can help support the show financially. And last but certainly not least, you have the good old-fashioned PayPal donation button. Any which way that you choose to support is greatly appreciated. It all helps me do more of what I love, which is writing and podcasting. Again, go to spuntoday.com/support. You can also support the Spun Today podcast by rating and reviewing the show wherever it is that you're listening to this episode. I'd really appreciate it because it really does help. Also, follow me on all socials. At Spun Today on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Spun Today on Instagram, and at Spun Today on YouTube, where you'll not only find full-length episodes of the podcast, but also chopped up clips and additional content. And of course, you can follow the Facebook page at facebook.com/Spun Today. Another way you can help support the Spun Today podcast and also upgrade that stale wardrobe of yours is by going to spuntoday.com/support and clicking on the banner for Stitch Fix. Once you do, you'll enjoy a $25 discount to your first purchase. And the way Stitch Fix works is pretty cool. I use it and I've never been disappointed. You'll set up a profile, you'll put in all the sizes for your clothes, as well as all the different brands and types of clothes that you like to wear. It's really simple and intuitive to set up. They'll show you pictures and pretty much give you a thumbs up or thumbs down option on if you would wear something or not. And you get to select all the brands that you already are used to wearing. With this information, there are thousands of passionate, trend-setting stylists who will curate a Stitch Fix box for you. They'll send you 5 items that you get to preview before they mail it to you, and you'll get to select based on the image if you like it or not. If not, they'll replace it with something else, and if so, they'll mail it to you absolutely for free. You can try everything on, and you have a few days to send everything back or keep the stuff that you want to keep. Then you can use that $25 credit that I mentioned towards your purchase of those items. Again, to freshen up your wardrobe and also support the Spun Today podcast, go to spuntoday.com/support and click on my affiliate link banner for Stitch Fix and enjoy your $25 credit. Do you want to start your own podcast? Have a great show idea that you want to get out into the masses but don't know quite how to get it from your head out into the world? Well, here's how. Use the podcast host Libsyn. That's who I use to bring the Spun Today podcast to you. And now you can use them the same way. Using the promo code SPUN, S-P-U-N, you can open up your Libsyn account today and get 2 months of free podcast hosting. Here's how it works. Once you record your show, you upload it to your Libsyn account, where you can fill in your episode notes, upload your podcast art, and schedule when you want your episodes to release. Once you do that, Libsyn will take care of the rest. They'll distribute your show to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and all the other podcatchers that you choose, instantaneously and seamlessly. Again, go to libsyn.com and use the promo code SPUN, S-P-U-N, to get 2 months free. Or use the affiliate link that's in the episode notes. Again, that's libsyn.com, promo code SPUN. Take that great podcast idea from out of your head and put it out into the world. And as always, folks, substitute the mysticism with hard work and start taking steps in the general direction of your dreams. Thanks for listening. I love you, Aiden.
I love you, Daddy.
I love you, Grayson.
I love you, Daddy.